Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. If you'd told me 2 weeks ago that guacamole could stare into your soul, or that rice might be listening when you talk trash about it, I'd have laughed in your face and probably made a joke about needing less weed in your system. But here I am, one traumatizing shift later, with a new aversion to Mexican fast food and an overwhelming desire to bleach my memory. It started like any other night shift at any other boring, underpaid job. I just transferred to this Chipotle location, some sad, half-lit branch tucked between a vape store and a payday loan place. I wasn't expecting glamour, I just wanted a chill gig. Night shifts are usually slow, right? Just the occasional drunk dude or stoner with the munchies. Nothing I couldn't handle. But I should have known something was off the moment I walked in. Tony, the manager, didn't even say hi. Didn't ask my name, didn't show me around. Just tossed a thick, stained binder on the counter like it was a dead raccoon and said, without looking at me, "Read these, follow them. Especially Rule 5, and don't mess with the rice, it hears you." Then he vanished. Literally just walked into the back like a red-haired cryptid and disappeared. I stared at the binder. The cover read, "Chipotle rules, night staff only." Great. Nothing like a little corporate horror to kick off the night. There was a greasy fingerprint on the front, and something reddish-brown crusted along the edge. I'd love to believe it was dried salsa. Deep down, though, I had a sinking feeling it was something else, something warmer. More arterial. Still, I'm a professional. I didn't gag much. I opened it. The inside wasn't any better. The pages were stained, wrinkled, and had that stickiness you only get from a combination of hot sauce, humidity, and fear. Some of the writing was smeared, and the whole thing smelled faintly like meat juice and anxiety. And the rules? Yeah, that's when things started to go downhill. Rule 1, do not stir the guac after 9:33 p.m. It stares back. Excuse me? Stares back? What does that even mean? Was this a joke? Some kind of twisted initiation ritual? Who was it? The avocados? Is there a haunted lime in there I should know about? I read on. Rule 2. If a customer with no shoes and a blank stare orders a double meat bowl, give them extra rice. No charge. No questions. Because nothing screams this guy deserves a bonus carb load like no footwear and the dead eyes of a haunted mannequin. Seriously? We're giving ghost hobos free rice now? That's where our profits are going? Whatever. I kept reading. Rule 3. Do not refill the hot salsa once the container runs out. Let it be. Okay, now I was starting to wonder if this binder was written by someone mid-psychotic break. Let it be? Like it's the Beatles of condiments? Was it going to refill itself like magic? Was it cursed? I had questions. Rule 4. If the digital order tablet beeps 3 times in a row, even when no order is placed, take the back door key and lock the bathroom. Immediately. What in the Taco Bell exorcist hell is that supposed to mean? The bathroom's possessed now? Who's coming out of there? The ghost of Chipotle past? Rule 5. Do not open the walk-in freezer if you hear music inside. That one actually gave me a chill. Not a big one, but enough to raise the tiny hairs on the back of my neck. Because here's the thing. Music isn't scary, but music in a place it shouldn't be? Like in a pitch-black freezer at 3 in the morning? That's how people die in horror movies. That's how you find yourself on a missing poster with your face all grainy and tragic. I closed the binder slowly and stood there for a second, unsure if I was being hazed or hired into a cult. Tony hadn't come back. No tour, no training, not even a "hey, the bathroom's over there and the demons come out at midnight." Just that nasty binder and a vague warning about psychic rice. I sighed and made my way to the back, trying to find the uniform bin, or at least some clue as to where they kept the pants. The supply closet was a disaster. Mop buckets, broken fans, and a pile of shirts that smelled like onions and broken dreams. I fished out a crumpled black Chipotle tee, tossed it over my tank top, and started digging around for pants. Then I heard it. The front door chime. Someone had just walked in. Of course they had. My first customer of the night. I wasn't even fully dressed yet, and I was about to serve burrito bowls under the guidance of a binder that warned me not to anger the guacamole. Fantastic. I slapped on the apron, smoothed my hair, and walked out to meet whoever the hell had just wandered into my new nightmare. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Nothing loud, just the faintest wet squelch, like someone dragging a soaked towel across tile. Slow, deliberate, wrong. Then came the smell. Not the usual Chipotle combo of grilled meat and too much cilantro. No, this was mildew and pond water, like something had crawled out of a swamp and decided to stop by for a burrito. I stepped through the kitchen doors and froze. He was already standing at the counter. A man. At least, I think it was a man. He had the general shape, but something was off. He wore a black long-sleeved shirt and jeans, both of which clung to him like they'd been soaked, not from rain, but something viscous, sticky, slippery, unnatural. And then there were his feet. Bare, no shoes, no socks. Just pale, veiny feet planted flat on the tile surrounded by a growing puddle. Water, if it was water, dripped steadily from his clothes. Every few seconds, a droplet would fall from the end of his sleeve or chin, splashing with a disgusting little plop. The puddle spread wider, seeping into the grout. And his hair, if you could even call it that. He had 3 long strands, so thin they looked almost like wires, plastered to his face and neck. Not normal thin. Sickly, stringy, like they'd been pulled from a drain and stuck back on with spit. They clung to his skin as he stood completely still. Not moving, not blinking, just staring. And I stood there like an idiot, halfway between asking for his order and calling animal control. I mean, I've seen weird customers. Everyone who's worked in fast food has. You get used to it, but this guy? He didn't feel weird. He felt wrong. Like reality hadn't loaded him in properly. Still, my customer service instincts kicked in, against my better judgment. "Welcome to Chipotle," I said, keeping my voice even and trying really hard not to breathe through my nose. "What can I get started for you?" He didn't move for a second. Then he slowly raised his head. His eyes met mine. No blink, no twitch, no life. They were dull, grayish, but not dead exactly. More like he'd never learned how to be alive in the first place. And then, finally, he opened his mouth. "Double chicken bowl." His voice was low, hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in years. "No beans, no corn, no soul." I stared at him. "No soul?" I repeated before I could stop myself. He didn't respond, just kept staring. I swallowed, nodded like that was a totally normal modification, and started building the bowl. Rice, double chicken, no beans, no corn, and apparently no moral compass. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want answers. I finished assembling it and slid the bowl across the counter. He didn't take it. He just kept looking at me. Then, without blinking, he said, "That was your warning." Just like that. No emotion, no follow-up. "That was your warning." He turned, dripping, and walked out. Still barefoot, still silent. He didn't take the food. He didn't pay. He didn't look back. He left the door open behind him, and for a long time I just stood there, bowl still in my hands, wondering what the hell had just happened. Then I remembered the binder. I ran to the back like my sanity depended on it, which, spoiler alert, it probably did, and grabbed the gross little book of nightmares Tony had tossed at me earlier. I yanked it open and scanned the pages, flipping until I found it. Rule 2. If a customer with no shoes and a blank stare orders a double meat bowl, give them extra rice. No charge. No questions. My stomach dropped. I hadn't done that. I gave him exactly what he asked for. No more. No less. I thought I was being efficient. I thought the rules were a joke. But now there were wet footprints on the floor. Not just where he had stood, but all the way back to the door. Still there. Still glistening. The puddle hadn't dried. I stared at them. Then I remembered how casually he'd said it. "That was your warning." I didn't know what would have happened if I'd broken Rule 5, or stirred the guac after hours, or filled the salsa, but now I had a very personal understanding of what it felt like to break Rule 2. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I don't know how long I stood there staring at those footprints. The wet ones, the ones that wouldn't go away. They shimmered under the fluorescent lights like someone had poured oil onto the tile. Except they didn't fade. They didn't dry. They just stayed. Like they were part of the floor now. Like the man had branded himself into the store with whatever was leaking off his body. I told myself I was being dramatic. I grabbed the mop and tried to clean them again. Top-tier effort this time. I went full Cinderella scrubbing mode. Bleach, disinfectant, elbow grease. 5 minutes later, the footprints were back. Exactly the same. Same placement, same puddle, like I'd never touched them. I tried a second time, a third. I even stood there for 10 minutes just watching the floor. The second I blinked, they were back. Eventually, I gave up, threw the mop in the corner and decided if the floor wanted to be haunted, it could pay rent. I needed a distraction, something simple, something that didn't involve mysterious puddles or soulless rice-hungry cryptids. That's when another customer walked in. The bell above the door jingled, and in walked a guy who looked, blessedly, like an actual human. Late 20s, slightly awkward posture that screamed accountant. He gave me a polite little nod as he approached. "Hey," he said, checking his phone. "Can I get a bowl with white rice, black beans, chicken, lettuce, guac, and sour cream?" A normal order, thank God. I smiled, trying to pretend I hadn't just been fighting off existential dread with a mop. I moved down the line. Rice, check. Beans, check. Chicken, we were still stocked. Lettuce, yep. Guac, my hand paused over the tub. Something tickled in the back of my brain. What time was it? I glanced at the wall clock, 9:42 p.m. My heart sank. The binder flashed in my mind like a neon warning sign. Rule 1, do not stir the guac after 9:33 p.m. It stares back. Now, I don't know what kind of sick cosmic joke it is that I somehow remembered the exact minute a tub of avocado turns demonic, but there it was. 9:42. But what was I supposed to do? The guac was sitting right there, green and creamy, not doing anything, yet. The customer was watching me. I couldn't just ignore it. He saw it. He knew it was there. I picked up the big silver spoon. Slowly, carefully. Just one scoop, that's it. I dipped it in and shifted the surface slightly, and that's when I saw it. An eye. Right there, just below the surface. Wide, milky, unblinking, floating in the green like it belonged there, like it was just another ingredient. I froze. I stared at it. It stared back. And then, another eye opened, right beside the first one. It blinked once, then locked onto me like it knew exactly who I was. I dropped the spoon with a clatter and took a full step back. I swallowed. "I'm sorry, it smells weird, sir. I don't feel comfortable giving it to you." He blinked at me, clearly thrown. Okay. Can I get extra sour cream then?" "Of course," I said, my voice a little too high-pitched. I loaded that bowl with enough sour cream to drown a toddler and handed it over like nothing happened. He took it, thanked me, and left. I exhaled, turned to the tub of guacamole, and they were still there. The eyes, both of them, just watching. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed the entire container, metal tub and all, and marched it to the trash bin. "You don't pay me enough for this," I muttered and chucked the whole thing. Straight into the trash. I didn't even care if Tony got mad about the missing container. I'd Venmo him for it. What I was not going to do was spend the rest of my shift being eyeballed by possessed produce. After that, things calmed down, sort of. A few more customers came in. I kept things moving. No haunted food. No gooey footprints. Someone did slip near the counter, on the same exact patch where the wet guy had stood, but I gave them their bowl for free, and they laughed it off. "Your floor's haunted," the guy joked. "You don't know the half of it, dude." The clock ticked toward 10. The store was quiet again. I found myself wiping down the counter, humming a little to myself like maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined all of it. But then I looked down the line. The hot salsa tub was empty, and that's when the real horror started. There are certain things that just shouldn't happen in a restaurant. Salsa refilling itself is one of them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It was nearing the end of the rush. If you could call 2 people and a guy who definitely smelled like weed a rush. I was actually starting to relax a little. The guac had been successfully exorcised via dumpster, the eyeballs were gone, and the rice hadn't whispered any secrets. Yet. Then my last customer of the hour walked in. Teenage dude. Tall. Wearing a hoodie with a cracked Red Hot Chili Peppers logo. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, and he placed his order without lifting his eyes off his phone. White rice, no beans, steak, cheese, lettuce, hot salsa. The last scoop. I watched as the spoon scraped the bottom of the metal bin and came back with one lonely blob of salsa clinging its edge. I tapped it off into his bowl, closed the lid, and slid it across the counter. "Thanks," he muttered. Already walking out. I turned back to the line, thinking, okay, time to go refill the hot salsa before the next person walks in and throws a fit about how mild is for cowards. I took a step toward the kitchen, stopped. Something scratched at the back of my brain like a nail on glass. The binder, the rule. Rule 3. Do not refill the hot salsa once the container runs out. Let it be. Let it be. Like the salsa was grieving or something. I looked back at the tub. Empty. Definitely empty. I took another step toward the kitchen. Paused. Then turned around again and stared. The salsa tub was no longer empty. It was refilling. At first I thought I was seeing things, that maybe the last scoop hadn't cleared it completely. But no. I was watching it fill up slowly, as if someone had attached an invisible hose underneath and was pumping it back in. Thick red salsa rose from the bottom of the pan, spiraling lazily like it had all the time in the world. It bubbled once, then again, almost playfully, but it didn't look right. Too dark. Salsa's supposed to be red-orange, with bits of chopped pepper and seeds. This looked thick, like molasses mixed with motor oil. The color was off, maroon, almost rust-colored, a deep, coagulated red that immediately made my stomach twist. I leaned forward just a little. The surface shifted, glistening like fresh paint. No, not paint. Blood. That's what it looked like. Not ketchup. Not beet juice. Chunky. Bloody. Sludge. And then, because my fight-or-flight response is broken beyond repair, I did the dumbest thing I've probably ever done in my entire life. I grabbed a chip and dipped it in. Just a little taste. I don't even know why. Morbid curiosity? Demonic peer pressure? Satan's influence? I honestly couldn't tell you. But my hand moved on its own, and the next thing I knew, that chip was in my mouth. The taste hit instantly. Metal. Salt. Heat. Something else. Something wrong. I gagged and spat it onto the floor. Red sludge and half-chewed chip exploded across the tile like a crime scene. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying not to puke. My throat burned. My tongue felt like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper and vinegar. It wasn't just bad, it felt evil. Like whatever was in that tub had no business being swallowed by anything remotely human. And while I was hacking up what might have been someone else's blood, I heard it. Beep. I straightened up slowly. Beep. I turned toward the front. Beep. 3 beeps. The digital order tablet. It sat silently on the counter, glowing faintly in the dark. No new order, no DoorDash notification, no name on the screen, but it had beeped. Exactly. 3 times. My blood ran cold. I didn't even hesitate. I sprinted to the back like I was running for my life. Because maybe I was. My shoes squeaked across the tile, and I slipped a little as I yanked open the drawer that held the spare keys. My fingers fumbled over metal, shaking as I found the one marked, back bathroom. The rule flashed again in my mind, word for word. If the digital order tablet beeps 3 times in a row, even when no order is placed, take the back door key and lock the bathroom. Immediately. I flew into the hallway and stopped. The floor was wet, not mopped wet, slime wet. That same glistening trail I'd seen before. That slow-drying, translucent goo that looked like it had dripped off something that didn't belong in this dimension. It leaked from the crack under the bathroom door and trailed toward the front of the store. My heart plummeted. I was too late. I was supposed to lock the bathroom, but whatever I was trying to trap had already gotten out. The trail snaked its way to the food line and stopped, right there, behind the counter. I took cautious steps forward, holding my breath, and that's when I saw it. The food moved. I'm not kidding. The food moved. The tub of black beans shivered. The beans themselves rippled in their own sauce, swimming in slow, lazy circles. The corn, God help me, squirmed like yellow larvae, wriggling in the vat. The lettuce rustled like it was breathing. It was like the entire line had come alive. And watching. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stood there, hands trembling, watching the food we serve every day, food people eat without question, dance and writhe like it had minds of its own. And then, mercifully, the bell above the door jingled. I flinched, and the second I did, everything stopped. The beans stilled, the corn went limp, the lettuce flattened. I turned to the entrance and found a guy standing there, bleary-eyed and baked out of his mind, smelling like skunk and asking for a double bowl with extra everything. I blinked at him, the haunted salsa still burning in the back of my throat. Sure, I said, already reaching for the rice. Because what else could I do? The food was alive. Tony wasn't answering his damn phone, and I still had half a shift left to survive. I should have walked out right then. Should have untied my apron, thrown it on the pile of living lettuce, and never looked back. But instead, I made a second bowl for a guy whose eyes looked like 2 red Solo cups. Because apparently, I'm a people pleaser. even when the corn is wiggling. He leaned on the counter with the weight of someone who had definitely smoked half a dispensary in the parking lot and watched me with intense, greasy curiosity as I worked. As I layered rice, beans, cheese, and the least offensive-looking meat, I realized something horrifying. I was out of chicken. I stared into the metal pan, scraping at the empty bit stuck to the bottom. No more chicken. None in the backup tray either. And Stoner Dude? He was waiting. He needed his protein. Probably thought I was saving the good stuff for myself. I wiped my hands on my apron and gave him a smile that screamed, "I'm totally not about to risk my life for this, don't worry." "Gimme just a second," I said. "Gotta grab more chicken from the back." And that's when I heard it. Soft at first, just a whisper of sound that didn't belong in a restaurant kitchen. Jazz. Old. Grainy. Like it was being played on a record that had been left out in the sun too long. A lazy, meandering trumpet hummed out a tune that sounded half familiar, like something from an old cartoon where someone's sneaking down a hallway in striped pajamas. I stopped mid-step. My blood turned to ice, because I knew exactly where it was coming from. The freezer. My brain screamed, "No," in all caps. I froze, standing in that terrible silence between the notes. Me 5. Do not open the walk-in freezer if you hear music inside. I knew the rule. I knew it like I knew how to roll a burrito with my eyes closed, and yet, I looked at Stoner Bowl Dude. He was waiting, watching, possibly drooling. He'd ordered double chicken. I had 0 chicken. I stood in the hallway, torn between survival instinct and customer satisfaction. And because I have the self-preservation skills of a horror movie extra, I reached for the freezer handle. I told myself it was probably nothing, a prank. Maybe someone left a Bluetooth speaker in there as a joke. Maybe Tony had bad taste in ambient noise. I opened the door. Darkness. Not dim, not underlit, colorless, featureless, eternal. It wasn't just dark, it was wrong. I stepped inside. No cold blast, no condensation, no shelves, no meat, no boxes, just a floor that went on forever. And in the middle of that endless black, a record player. Old, wooden, the kind you see in vintage shops that smell like mold and regret. It spun slowly, emitting that scratchy jazz loop over and over like it didn't realize the party ended decades ago. The trumpet weaved in and out of tune like it was thinking, like it was alive. I took one step forward and realized I couldn't hear my own shoes. No echo. No tap, just the music. Then, breathing, slow, deep, familiar. I wasn't alone, but the sound wasn't coming from anywhere specific. It was everywhere, above, below, all around me, as if the very space around me was inhaling. I turned around to run, but the door wasn't there. No gleam of metal, no green exit sign, no freezer shelves, no walls. I reached behind me blindly, my hands slapped into air, more nothing, no handle, no hinges, no way out. I screamed, loud. My voice tore out of me, but it didn't echo. It was like I'd screamed into a vacuum bag. Panic clawed up my throat. I ran forward, thinking maybe the door had shifted. Maybe if I could just... But there was no forward. There was no direction, just the record player, and the breathing. I dropped to the ground. I didn't even feel the floor, just pressure, cold and soft like thick fog. And I cried. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet, hopeless tears, hot and slow. I was going to die in a freezer listening to sad jazz. I curled up on the ground, hands over my ears, eyes squeezed shut. This was it. This was how I went out, eaten by vibes. But then, a voice. "What the hell are you doing on the floor, Melanie?" I blinked. Bright light hit my eyes. I was behind the counter, on the ground, in a fetal position, apron half off, crying. And Tony, actual human Tony, was standing over me, holding a clipboard like I was just another problem on his checklist. He looked at me like I was the worst thing he'd seen all day, and considering what I've seen, rude. I sat up, dizzy, my throat raw. I was in the freezer, I gasped. There was music, and the record player, and the chicken was gone. And there was no door. Tony rolled his eyes so hard I swear he saw the back of his own skull. He ran a hand down his face, then muttered, "That's why we follow the rules." He said it like he'd said it before. Like he was tired of this. Like I was just the latest idiot to crack open Pandora's walk-in fridge. And that was the last straw. I stood up slowly, untied my apron. "Well, you can deal with your period salsa and slime floors yourself," I said, voice shaking. "I'm not doing this anymore." I dropped the apron on the counter and walked out. Didn't clock out. Didn't even look back. I don't know what Tony does now. Or if the guac grew another eye. or if the rice still listens, but I do know one thing. I will never eat at Chipotle again.